guys, welcome to Trauma Talks Live. My name is Russ Tellup. This show is created to help you understand your nervous system, to share real stories, and to offer language and tools for your healing journey. What you'll hear here is education and reflection. This is not therapy. It's not a substitute for therapy or professional or medical care. Every guest speaks from their own lived experience, and these conversations are part of a mission to help the world understand trauma, what it feels like, how it shapes us, and how we find our way back home to ourselves. If you're in crisis or feeling unsafe, please reach out to your local resources or dial 988 on your cell phone. You're not alone, and the support is always available. So, if you guys have been following along, I've been part of an anthology project with a good friend of mine, Chris Mamone. Chris, and then we've got a couple of people on the call with us that are going to join us today. We've got hold on a second. We got Shalem. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Shalem Dazan.
Shalem Dazan and Teresa Sims. Teresa wrote the foreword for the book. Shalem was also a co-author. So we're just going to chat about the book, let y'all know what's going on with it so you can check it out. So far, we've had some amazing, great sales. The launch was just fantastic. When I say sales, I mean exposure. Lots of people have downloaded the book and have read it, and we've gotten some amazing reviews. So I'm just going to toss it to Chris. And Chris, you just talk about how this thing came about and your vision and kind of where we're at.
Definitely. So I just want to say welcome, guys. This is a copy of the book that's coming through. So the pathway to finding this book and creating this idea and bringing it to life was really born out of the podcast I started this year. I started my podcast at the end of February. I've talked to 125 guests so far in that short window of time. And after recording about 40, 50 episodes, I started picking up on a common theme that people do not hold space very well for grief or loss or trauma in our lives. And we are told in many ways to let it go and get over it and move on. But what I caught is the common theme between all my guests is that none of them ever did that. What they did do, by the way, is they moved forward with their grief. And they found ways to remember and honor and create a legacy for that loss. And it was actually the thing that propelled them forward in life instead of holding them back. So contradictory to what society has taught us about holding space for grief and processing it, I've actually seen people use their grief as a very moving way forward in their life to create some beautiful parts of whether that's a career path such as coaching or writing a book like we did. I've seen people going out there and changing the world by utilizing that grief as a powerful, empowering source in their life instead of something that holds them back. And so I reached out to several guests that were on my podcast, and I was very, very humbled to say that not a single one turned it down. That was the funny part. And what also came next, by the way, is some guests in the book had ideas of what they wanted to write, and it quickly became something deeper and more powerful. And Russ is a prime example of that. I hope he shares that today, how his story came to light. But I was really honored to work with so many people in different countries, Canada and Australia, the United States, all over the country. This really was a global project in a lot of ways. And also, this book doesn't have loss like we typically talk about it. Everybody thinks grief comes from death and dying. There's so many parts of life in there that were talked about in the book that we oftentimes don't speak of, like pet loss and losing relationships, going through divorce, things like that. Talking about suicide. We talked about all these areas of life that aren't really held space for in the book. So I personally was very, very grateful and very, very honored that so many people that I had met through podcasting wanted to jump on board and create such an empowering, moving book that talked about grief in a whole different light. Because I think this is where we can help change the world and start helping people discover their own empowered grief journey.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the experience for me was absolutely incredible. I'm sure that Shalem and Teresa would say the same. In fact, I've heard them say it in the past. It was enlightening for me. I mean, it was a whole healing journey in and of itself. This is the Facebook or the Amazon page, guys. We can go check it out. That's the cover. We're looking at about 45 reviews. Man, if you guys have read this and downloaded this, we would love it if you would write some reviews. We'd love to get that above 100 would be optimal, right?
Yeah, it'd really be awesome to get 100 reviews. And I only say that because the power of what's already come out of us launching this book, we've gotten 45 reviews from across the country and across the world. And I'll be honest with you guys, when I started thinking about this book project, I was really concerned how it was going to be received. I didn't know if people were going to like it. I didn't know if it was going to be, oh, it's another one of those books. I didn't know how people were going to take it. And when I read the reviews on Amazon that came out the first 2 days after we launched it, I was really hit in a very deep place with it because what people wrote in those reviews came from the heart. It came from the soul of humanity. And it was in a place that made me so humbled and honored to see that all of the hard work we put into and writing our chapters really touched people in a very powerful place. And I'll share Shalem for I'll have her talk about her story, but I'll just say that she went through back-to-back losses. She lost a husband to cancer, lost a boyfriend to a heart attack, lost her pet Digby, her dog that meant the world to her. She lost all those things back to back. And in many ways, writing these chapters in these books, it was reliving grief. It was reliving trauma in many ways, but it also opened the door for us to talk about the healing side of grief, which not a lot of people talk into in these books. And so Shalem, for example, her chapter, she offered a whole different light and perspective of walking through grief, and then also where do we start from healing? What does this mean for us? How does this transform us? And I think that's what's so powerful within this book. Russ, you did that in your chapter. I did it in mine. And for those of you guys who are going to pick the book up, it does start with Teresa's forward, which is very, very powerful. And I do want to read that really quickly for you guys so you can get an idea of what this sounds like when you pick this book up. Show you the forward real quick if you guys can see it. Let's see here. There we go. So the forward starts like this. However you arrived at this moment, know this. You are exactly where you're meant to be. The universe has guided you to this book, and only you and your creator know why. The Empowered Grief Journey is 23 stories of grief that carved a new path forward. It is more than a collection of stories. It's a sanctuary of healing, love, and transformation. And so I couldn't be more honored and humbled, by the way, because Teresa has gone through a massive amount of trauma in her life over decades. And she's become a very beautiful person who is a healer, and she helps coach people with NLP practices and helps people create that meaningful, deepful change they're looking for who go through grief and trauma. And so what not a better way than to have somebody who has lived experience and also has healed on the other side of it to write us a powerful forward to introduce us into this collection of stories. So I'm excited for you guys to pick up a copy of this book. It will change your life. I will tell you that. It's very
if
powerful.
you are at least on Amazon, if you're a member of Kindle Unlimited, you can still access that for free. Otherwise, the paperback is $18. So it's next to nothing. And I think the Kindle's only $9.99, right? So
yeah, Kindle's only $9.99. Yeah.
I've got my paperback on the way. I ordered a Kindle the day that pre-ordering started. So I think I was probably one of the first people. I think all of us probably did it. And I'm just now getting a chance to read the other chapters because I hadn't had the opportunity to read all those chapters, only my own. So man, there's some stuff in there. I've been reading Shalem's prior to going live here. And Shalem, would you mind sharing a little bit about your story and kind of what's in the chapter and what people might expect to see?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, I've read a lot of grief books too, but like you, we didn't, as authors, have access to reading all the other chapters until the book was all put together. And this is one of the best grief books I've ever read. I felt so seen and heard and understood by going through other people's experiences and the way that they described their griefs. And mine happens to be bereavement grief, but all the other griefs were absolutely just as important, and their experiences that they were able to put into really, really quality writing. Wow, I just felt like they were describing so much of what I had gone through that I didn't necessarily always have words for. So in my chapter, it's called "The Return to a High Mountain Place," and so much of my grief story kind of revolves around this high mountain place that's called Illumination Rock. And I wrote a book last year called Illumination: A Griever's Journey Through the Darkness. That was that was real time chronicled over the course of my grief. So I had wrote my first poem about grief the night that my husband died of cancer. And that's really when my grief story erupted. And we were newlyweds. So I was 45 years old when I became a widow, and he was 48. And he had been a survivor of childhood cancer. So he had a zest for life like nobody I've ever met. And as you can imagine, he didn't want to die, and I didn't want him to. So when he did, I did a deep dive into grief, and you kind of get a taste of that in my chapter. And then, time moves forward. And one of the things that really got me through the darkest days was our dog, Digby. And I can still see my husband sitting there on his deathbed. And he said, I want my ashes scattered someplace high and beautiful, like Illumination Rock up on our favorite mountain, which was Mount Hood. And we were backcountry skiers. So that's, it's kind of it's a long climb to get there, and then you ski down miles to get back to the parking lot. So that following, he died in January of 2017, and the following May, I took that solo trip up to Illumination Rock, and I had his ashes, and then I had our dog Marley's ashes. That was before Digby, and honestly, I was so incredibly grateful to have Marley's ashes to leave up there in that high mountain place, because it's lonely, and it can be a hard thing to let the ashes go, even though it's just ashes, it's still a connection.
Sure.
So, and then later that summer, my best friend got a brain virus, and she died within 6 weeks. And that felt very dramatic at the time. I think one of the things I'm reading in the book, and I so appreciate that other people have gone through this experience, that because it can feel very isolating when it's happening to you, is that you kind of lose a lot of your friends and family because they don't really know how to be with you when you're in a really intense experience of grief. And so Bevan was one of those friends that she was the only friend actually that we became better friends after my husband died. And she was like, you do grief your way. I just love you. So, I was with her the day that we realized that she had lost her equilibrium and couldn't walk straight. I was there in the emergency room and in the hospital. And she died very, very quickly and left behind, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And it was just really tragic in every way. And so I was really grateful to be able to write about that in this chapter, because I didn't write about that in my book, Elimination. Somehow, I don't know why. I was writing something else at the time. I kind of went into I was writing a fiction, to be honest. I went into a grief fiction that I was writing, and I just didn't have the poetry for Bevan. So it was really an honor to be able to talk about her in this chapter. And then in my chapter, I move forward to the day that my dog Digby did die. And that was 2 days shy of the 6-year anniversary from when my husband died. And just like my husband, he died in his bed with my arms wrapped around him and the cold January air coming in. And that was the loneliest I've ever felt that day that he died. And I realized that even though I felt alone for a lot of that 6 years, I was never alone with Digby. And what a light he was, and what a friend. He taught me so much about love. But then when he died, I think I would have gotten into a really depressed state, except for I knew I had to go back up to Illumination Rock, which takes training to climb that mountain and get your ski legs on to ski down. It's off piste, so it's a mountain experience. So a few weeks later, I booked a couple of ski trips, and on one of those ski trips, I met Bentley, and we fell in love. And honestly, I mean, we just praised God. We were like, God had a great plan after all this grief, because he had experienced 3 suicide deaths in his family: his dad, his brother, and his oldest son. So he actually understood a lot about grief too, and we wanted to hear about each other's griefs. And one of our first conversations was around this trip about I was going to take to Illumination Rock, and he wanted to come with me. He didn't want me to do that journey alone, and in fact, he did. He accompanied me, and we had reached altitude. We were about to put our skis on and do the traverse over to Illumination Rock when he dropped to his knees, and he died of a heart attack up there in that mountain. And that was the most dramatic and traumatic experience of my life. It was so sudden. And I came down that mountain a different person. I could write a whole book about just that day of everything that it transpired. But, eventually when that day was done, I had to face the rest of my life alone. And I went back to writing, and I I camped out in the back of my truck in wild places in Idaho and Oregon for, for about 3 weeks. I couldn't be around people. I kind of lost my mind. It felt, unreal that this was happening. So, yeah, you kind of get that in my chapter. And, one of my signature sayings that has come out of all the deep thoughts that I've had around grief and life and beauty and love, is this saying that perhaps after all, a broken heart is like a broken mirror with more places to reflect the light. And I do believe that. And I see that in this anthology of authors that I've been involved with. Every single one that I've connected with has shown such an incredibly beautiful light. And I think for all of us who are in the grief space, people, whether they talk to us about their grief, they know that we're a safe place to go with that. And so I hear so many people's grief stories, and I see that the light that they're reflecting as they come through into a healing place, and find gratitude, and anyway, right, despite the hardship, and just realize, like, we have a choice. We're going to be changed when we go through these dramatic experiences. We're not going to be the same. We don't have a choice about that, but we have a choice of how we change. And we can either turn bitter and angry. And I was for a period of time, believe me, that's a natural thing. So don't judge yourself if you're there, but you just don't want to get stuck there. Ultimately, you really want to turn into a better version of yourself, a stronger version, a kinder version, one with more empathy and compassion.
Yeah. Turn the pain into purpose.
100%.
Yeah. I'm curious, because you've been in grief counseling for quite a while now, right?
Just about 1.5 years. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's, and you, Chris, too. I'm curious and you, Teresa. I work with a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of men's mental health stuff. And sometimes you feel like a sponge taking on all these stories as you're hearing all these stories. How do you guys cope with that and not allow that to trigger you further?
Shalane, do you want to go ahead on that one?
Poetry's always been what has helped me to, just to put it down in a space, and then allow that to be what it is and walk away. So after my sessions with my grief clients, I will often write them a poem about what we spoke about, and they're really grateful to have that. I'm putting it in a reflection that they weren't able to, because I've honed my poet's voice, and always spinning it with a sense of, like, I know that there's strength there and that you will find the light. I always spin it in that kind of a way at the end. So yeah, that has helped, because you're right. A lot of these stories they're really sad, and they come with, oh yeah, my daughter died last year, but gosh, my mom committed suicide when I was a kid too, and so they come with unprocessed grief from earlier things as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you write a poem for clients you work with. I got asked that question because I haven't announced this to everybody yet, but I got a job offer from somebody through my podcasting to work as a grief caregiver for people in an organization that go through organ transplants, where they lose somebody in their life, and there's a quick moment of decision of, do we donate organs or not? And that's a whole can of worms, because that person doesn't show up there willingly. It's usually from a car accident or a severe injury or something that goes on. So there's compound trauma going on in that moment. And that was one of the questions I got asked: how do I deal with that? And I told people that I interviewed with, I said, I don't take that on because it's not my experience of life. It's not mine to own. And I got a little bit of a look funny with that one, because it looked like I was brushing things off. So I elaborated on it and I said, I'm very much here to hold space for people. I'm very much here to listen. I'm very much here to try to understand and meet you where you are. But at the end of the day, for me to take on your experience is taking away from you having your moment in life right now. So I really hold a boundary with that when I work with people, that I'm very much here to hold space, but your experience is your experience. And I cannot tell you when you're going to, quote unquote, move on from it or get over it, as people say. I can't tell you that. I also can't tell you when you're going to feel better. I can't tell you that you're going to have perfect days after month 5. I can't say those things. But what I can also say, though, is that this moment will be very painful for a long time, whether that's weeks or months or even years for some people. But I also tell you that one day that light will come to you and it will show itself to you in your own time, in your own way. And I only hope that in that moment, you'll be able to see that just in a glimmer of it and see it. And you'll be able to sit there like I did in the worst moments of my life when I lost my son and say, this can either be a tragedy that defines me, or it can be the thing that has purpose in my life where I go out and create a legacy and I honor that person I lost. I make meaning and purpose out of my life from this. And that's not to say that we all, by the way, will not have bad days, because as we know in the grief community, you have good days, you have bad days, and you got to be appreciative of the good ones. So when the bad ones roll along, you got something to build off of. And so I always tell people it's like an ocean. You're going to have days where it's calm and smooth sailing. You're going to have days that you get pulled under and you're struggling to catch your breath. And to say that that's a normal way to hold grief and understand that that's what's going to happen as you navigate this journey, I try to normalize that for them. So that's usually how I help people navigate that challenge.
Yeah. Teresa.
Yes, sir.
Man. So I got to read your part first, as did Minnie. Wow. Do you mind sharing a little bit about the forward and how you got involved in the project?
Sure. I do not remember how I connected with Chris, but we have podcasted with each other a couple times now. And it just all of a sudden came. Chris asked me if I would consider writing the forward for the book. And it was a true honor to be asked. And after reading 4 or 5 of the submissions that Chris sent to me, to be able to understand the depth and the process of what he was trying to create, what we were all trying to create. Honestly, I have never been more honored in my life to submit and be part of something such as this Empowered Grief Journey. The stories that are submitted, they truly touch your life. Yes, I have gone through decades of my own stories and my own experiences. And that has allowed me to step back and take a look objectively at what was written in this book. And also the training that I've done and the coaching that I do. I understand what everyone is doing in this book. I had been failed by professionals years and years ago that I went to for help, went to for understanding. And they either throw a pill at you or they tell you it's all in your head or whatever the case may be. No, I don't agree with that philosophy anymore. Talk therapy has its place. But for me, it was, I don't know how to phrase it correctly, but it was, I'm lost for words. Can you imagine that?
You know, Teresa, what I loved about you writing the forward is I still remember your messages you sent me on Facebook, and I knew when you sent me your response to reading those chapters, you were the right one to write the forward. And that was my big thing in the book, though, is I read everybody's chapters before you did, and I said, man, I got all these powerful submissions, and I was like, I need an equally powerful person that not only understands grief, but has walked grief like we have and gets it on that personal level. And like you said about professionals, I can't, I can only say, because I've talked to a lot of people on podcasts in that realm, that there are a lot of professionals out there that have let people down in this area of grief and suicidal ideations and things like that. I've heard the gamut podcasting. And I even ran into somebody a month ago that said there's a new grief certification for professional mental health counselors to help people get over grief in 12 months. That one blew my mind. And I said, I don't want any part of that because it doesn't work. It's a failed program that's going to fail people. And so I couldn't agree more with you about what you said. You wrote a very powerful forward that spoke to these chapters. It spoke to grief on a very personal level. And I think that's what's so powerful about this book is the way you wrote the forward. It meets people where they're at. And that's the best thing we could ever do when somebody's going through grief.
Yeah, Teresa, your forward was outstanding. I read it out loud with my mom, and we were both completely blown away. And that's when that's when I really understood what we were about to step into. So, I mean, the quality of the writing, and the quality of the experience you bring to it, it was really, really good.
Oh, thank you very much. I do appreciate that, and I want everyone to know that grief is a word. It is an emotion, and it is a normal emotion. And for people to say, you have to experience it this way, you have to deal with it that way, that is so wrong. Grief is so individualized, and there is no set formula for processing it or recovering from it. It is a transformation, and understanding how grief affects you and understanding that grief is not a badge you need to wear because you've gone through something horrific. No, it can be simple as, I mean, you look at that pillow that's behind me. That is one of my dogs that I lost 2.5 years ago. Suddenly, that she was my little, well, not little, she was my spirit animal. She was my soul. And to lose that on top of finding out my brother suddenly died, and to go be traumatized by a job that I had had, those things get compounded. And honestly, at that point in time, 3 years ago, grief brought me to my knees. I couldn't function. And then I found the work that I'm doing now, timeline therapy, NLP, and hypnotherapy. And through the community that I'm part of, we constantly do our regular cleanups of our emotions and our limiting decisions. And that is the most powerful thing that we can do, because we keep ourselves in a good place. Yes, grief has happened. Yes, trauma has happened. And I've been told for many years that I should be a trauma coach. And I just held up my hand and I said, no, I will not go there, because my trauma was still raw in some ways. However, when working with a client or with anyone doing a podcast, I can hold space for that individual. I protect myself. It's called a bubble. You know, you create a bubble from your core, and it just protects you from being, not from helping someone or hearing someone or empathizing with someone or showing compassion from someone, but from taking on someone else's experience. That's what we need to do. I mean, compassion is first and foremost in my world. And I want everyone to know that grief is a journey. As the book says, grief is a journey, but it's something that you can come out of. You can go through it. And there's so much learning that comes from it. And yes, it does transform you. Yes, it does change you. But who's to say that wasn't written in the cards for each one of us? You know,
It's beautifully said.
That's
and in
beautifully said.
my experience of my life, every time I was going through a horrible experience, including almost taking my own life at one time, all I kept hearing was, you're not finished here yet. So I knew there was a bigger purpose. And we all have a bigger purpose. We all have. There's more for us on this earth. And if not here, it's later by the legacies that we're leaving now.
Hey, Teresa, I wanted to read a part of your foreword, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
You wrote something very powerful that you've shared with me, and I thought the audience should hear this. Through this journey, I discovered how deeply grief had embedded itself in my body, mind, and soul, manifesting itself as dis-ease. Grief was consuming me. Now I understand grief not just emotionally, but also physically and spiritually. I've learned to process it, and I continue to heal every day, just as every author in this book has done. That is our wish for you, to find peace, healing, and grace. I thought that was a powerful part of the forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
You know, Chris reached out to me. I was I almost did say no because I didn't feel like I had anything to offer because I didn't have anything that I felt like I grieved. But as I started to write it, because he made the suggestion of writing about the grief you would feel after, you know, breaking a trauma bond, which is an intense grief.
Mhm.
So I started with that in mind, and as I started writing, this thing evolved into something completely different, and it evolved into the grief over my father's loss. Even though I wasn't grieving his loss, I was grieving the loss of the opportunity to reconcile. You know, so it ended up being pretty powerful for me as a healing journey. You know, all the way through that. In fact, Chris, is it cool if I read part of this chapter?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see if I can do it without crying.
And it's okay if you do.
I know. I was, excuse me, I was 5 years old. I didn't move fast enough when my father wanted me to. He picked me up off the living room floor and slammed my body into the hallway walls as he carried me to my room, kicked the door open and threw me inside. All through my childhood, moments like this taught me to disappear, to stay small, to read every room like a war zone, and eventually to abandon myself to survive. My father died around 2020 from COVID. We hadn't spoken in 25 years. He was an evil, psychotic, narcissistic, abusive man. The world felt safer to me without him in it. At first, I learned, excuse me, after I learned of his death, I felt free to be me in ways I had never allowed myself to be, free to speak in ways I hadn't spoken before because of his cruel teachings, had always echoed inside my mind. I didn't grieve. His death barely came into conversation. Maybe once or twice with my brother casually. There was no sadness, no weight, no loss, just relief, just open space. That's how I opened this chapter. But what it grows into from there is learning that I did grieve, not necessarily him, but the opportunity to reconcile or the opportunity to hear him say, I'm sorry for what I did to you and your mom and everyone else that I came in contact with over the course of 65 years. So, yeah, it was really intense. And man, I sent that first chapter to Chris, and it was really, really short because it was really, really hard to write about it. It was really difficult. So I found myself probably sending over 4 pages, 5 pages, maybe.
Yeah, right about 4 pages. Yep.
Yeah, and I had to go in and go into more detail on the stuff. But man, it going into this kind of deep-seated stuff in your body is hard, man. Releasing those emotions are really difficult. I was telling Chris recently, I'm now writing another book because I caught the bug, I guess. So I'm writing a memoir-ish type memoir, self-help, personal transformation type thing. My story and then practical tools that I learned that I can pass on in the book. But I've gotten through like age 12, chapter 3. And man, I have shed more tears on this keyboard in the last 2 weeks than I probably have in the last 2 years.
You know, Russ, that's a beautiful part of what I've seen you transform writing your chapter in this book. I've seen something amazing in you, and I'm going to openly share this with the audience, by the way, because Russ and I are the only 2 men in this project, and I don't say that as a brag or nothing. I'm saying that's reality. There's only 2 men in this entire book, and that's because men are not given space or taught emotions or taught how to feel. We're typically taught silence or be angry. We know those really well, but we don't know the in between. And what I am going to share with you guys, by the way, since you're listening to Russ's podcast today, this is a guy who actually knows how to be vulnerable. And in my opinion, in my view of the world, after what has gone on writing this book, vulnerability is strength. It is not weakness. And that is a big misconception society has. Vulnerability is strength. And when you read Russ's chapter, you will see that. And if you're a man listening to this right now, strength is going to be doing what Russ did, which is getting vulnerable with those emotions, allowing yourself to feel. When I read his chapter and I heard about his father cussing at him, throwing trash on him, and treating him the way he did as he opened with that chapter, my heart broke because I couldn't imagine being a little kid like that and having a parent that you should be able to trust and feel safe around treat you like that and cause so much unsafety and so much threatening environment. I couldn't even fathom it. I started getting water in my eyes reading that book. And I realized that who I know Russ to be today. I see this kid that grew up in a very broken home. He became something great. And by the way, he's got more greatness coming. Just wait for it. But I saw a guy out there saying, I'm going to be a man to show other men how to be vulnerable. And I'm going to show them that is strength, not weakness. And I'm going to show them that it's okay to grieve.
I don't
And
remember
so
this. I don't know. Remember, Shalene, I did see you raise your hand. I'll just a second. I don't remember if this ended up in the chapter, but there was a time when I was about 5 or 6 years old where I was sitting on the curb and the kids were holding my arms down, kicking me in the face, trying to get me to cry, because my dad had taught me so much not to cry that it had become like a thing. Russ doesn't cry. So they were literally running across the street, drop kicking me in the face, trying to get me to cry. Yeah. But that's, at 3 days old, you get your first spanking for crying. I mean, that kid right there.
That's God. My heart just goes out to you, Russ, after reading your chapter. I'm sorry, man, but you have insurmountable strength in you.
Shalene, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I thank you so much for writing your chapter. It was such an important one for this book. And don't talk about it. My dad died 5 months before my husband did, but I never consider that as part of my grief story because, like you, there were adverse experiences in my childhood and we no longer spoke, but you put words to something that, I really hadn't even considered, but, in hindsight could see how those patterns do affect how we grieve later in life. And so, thank you for finding the courage to be part of this. And it mattered to me. And I think it's going to matter to a lot of people. And
I hope so. Right. I mean, that's the goal with all of these is with anything that we're doing. I mean, all of us are coaches I mean, we're all in the space doing the work. So we're not out here to fill up our Facebook pages, right?
I congratulate you as well, Russ and Chris, for being the only 2 men in here. And what you're doing is groundbreaking. Men have emotions just like women. Men are human beings just like women. Men go through things just like women. We just process things a little bit differently, but that doesn't mean it doesn't affect who we are, how we are, and it shapes our lives in so many different ways. But by the 2 of you sharing your stories, you are opening a floodgate for other men to know it's okay, it's safe, we can talk about what happened, what went on. And I applaud both of you so much.
Well, thank you. That is
Thank you.
the mission from my standpoint, is to get as many men as possible to realize that vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is strength. And that you're just going to pass this crap down to your kids, and they're going to pass it down to their kids, and they're going to pass it down to their kids. I'm carrying stuff from the 1700s, man. It's silly. And until somebody goes enough and stops, puts the brakes on, and tries to break the cycle, right? So that's what the goal is. That's why we have the men's healing group. For those of you who are not in the group, we have a men's healing group on Facebook. It's called Men's Trauma Unlocking. If you look that up, I'm in it. Chris is in it. It is only for men, and the purpose of that is to create a safe space where men aren't feeling intimidated about sharing those emotions in front of women, if that makes sense.
Well, and sometimes the women are the catalyst for it as well. So
sometimes, sometimes. But I think like the idea of 2 guys sitting together and chatting, they can get into some pretty deep stuff. You give 2 guys the space to just sit alone and chat, and they'll get into some good stuff. Once women are introduced, men start putting on a show, and we start putting on the macho act, and it shuts everything down. So that was the reason for the men's only group, is to create a space where there's not that influence, so that they can just be themselves. And even if if you don't even want to participate, if you just want to read what other people are putting in there, join it. It's a good group. It's moderated. I don't tolerate any crap in there. As soon as somebody starts acting up, they're gone immediately. It's truly a group meant for healing. So if you guys want to join, go join it, and we'll add you to the group.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything?
I just would like to say grief is not the end. From grief, we're reborn. And we're reborn as to how it's written in the cards that we are to be. And don't fight it. Just don't fight it.
Shalene?
You know,
I mean, I think I could read one of my, if you don't mind, I'd read my last poem from my book Illumination, because after everything I went through, my final message was this poem. This says connect. And I really feel like that's what we're out here to do, is to encourage people to connect, because it can feel so isolating. So yeah, I'll read this one.
Yeah, please do.
When the sound of locust call stirs ancient forests in your bones, connect. When the thoughts first found in anger turn to butterflies, lighting paths of forgiveness, connect. When the first glance calls your heart to leap over rivers, casting hopes and dreams like sapphires and rubies towards a treasure chest of joy, connect. When lost dreams and broken hearts lie shipwrecked on islands under moonlit orbs, connect. When the only sound is your own heartbeat as emotions whisper trembling in deep places of regret, connect. When sitting stunned in grief's strong fist of struggle after ravens came in a murder of flight, connect. When daffodils and wild irises grow in places where the pain used to be, connect. When life's doorways open towards change or challenge or birth or death, connect.
Beautiful.
powerful.
That's a really great way to end this show. Thank you. Chris, you got anything for anybody? You got anything coming up?
So I got a second volume of this book we're going to be working on come February. I've got people lined up to do that.
Cool.
It's exciting. I'll be writing a second story in my book actually about losing my grandfather this time around, because that was one that happened 2 years before Caden, and that was a very profound, powerful moment of my life. I'll save that for another podcast. But what I want to build off of what Shalene talked about, connection, really quickly. When you guys read this book, I know it says Empower Grief Journey on the front, 23 stories of ours. This book's about you finding your Empower Grief Journey. And I want to encourage all of you guys, no matter if you're fresh in grief, fresh in loss, fresh in trauma, I want you to know this. The right up front, it's going to be really hard. That first year is just very turbulent. And I want you to be able to give yourself permission to be where you are. And you don't need to be anything other than who you are in that moment. But I want you to know that when you read these stories in this book, I want you to discover your own Empower Grief journey. I want you to discover what that means to you, because I'm a firm believer that every single person who reads this book and every single person who goes through grief and loss and trauma has their own hidden gifts, lessons, and blessings in their life. And everybody in this book who wrote a chapter showed that in their chapter. And so I want you to find those things, because what this book really is about is not just finding your Empower Grief journey, but paying it forward to other people who are standing where you once stood. And I know that all of us together, collectively as a whole in humanity, we can heal each other just by doing that. And so I want to leave you guys with that today. Find your own Empower Grief journey, but when you do, go help find other people and go help them. Because if you're like me and you didn't have support when you went through all these things, be the person that says, I'm going to give you the support. I'm going to be there for you. I'll walk beside you. Go be that person in the world today.
Absolutely. I've got a couple things going on. We've got a men's healing breakfast here in Colorado Springs. If you're local, that'll be at 7625 North Academy Boulevard. We're still working on the date. It's going to be right around Christmas. We're going to try to get some guys in there. I've got some speakers coming out. Frank Sinclair of Be Encouraged is the name of his business. He's a local motivational speaker. He'll be out to speak. I might try to get Joe Lewis of Angels of America's Fallen to come out and present kind of what he's doing. And then I'll be speaking as well. So if that's something you're interested in, it's 100% free. Breakfast is on me. My brother's got a ton of chickens, so we got tons of eggs. And so come out for a free breakfast and yeah, come out and be encouraged, right? All right, guys. Thanks so much, guys, for coming on. It was an honor to have all you on. It was an honor to write with all of you guys too. It's just been an absolute pleasure. It's going to take me a while to get through the rest of these chapters. Shalem, I'm on yours right now, and it's powerful. So cool. All right, guys. Well, we will let y'all go and catch you on the next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.